All right.
Okay, are we ready?
We are ready.
All righty. I picked Twelfth Night. Author introduction. We all know Shakespeare in one way or another. We've heard his name. He was a very prolific writer of the British theater. He was born in England. He was born on April 23rd, 1564, and he died, supposedly, on April 23rd, 1616, on his 52nd birthday, but the exact date of his death is unknown. He had a wife. Her name was Anne. He had 3 children, two girls and one boy, I believe. Their names were Susanna, Judith, and Hamnet. I'm not sure how you pronounce the boy's name. But he wrote over 38 plays, 150 poems, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, and As You Like It are some of them. Historical content. This play was written in 1601. It was first performed in 1602 at the Inns of Court. If I'm right, I believe that was kind of like a famous law place. I tried to look it up and I couldn't exactly figure out what it was. But this decade marks the end of the Elizabethan era and the beginning of the Jacobean era.
Yeah, I want to stop you real quick, Shay, I'm glad you brought that point up, just to explain what that is. Queen Elizabeth I had passed away in the year 1600, I think it was. And that caused a lot of issues in England because she didn't have a clear successor. So that is when James VI of Scotland became James I of England, and that started a whole new line of monarchs. The King James version of the Bible, he was the one who commissioned it. So yeah, I figured I would just interject there, Shay. Sorry about that.
No problem. Play summary. Let's see if I can move this out of the way so I can read a little bit. In the kingdom of Illyria, a nobleman named Orsino lies around, pining away for the love of Lady Olivia. He cannot have her because she is in mourning for her dead brother and refuses to entertain any proposals of marriage. Viola, separated from her twin Sebastian, dresses as a boy and works for the Duke Orsino, whom she falls in love with. Orsino is in love with Countess Olivia and sends Viola to her court for him, but Olivia falls for Viola instead. Sebastian arrives, causing a flood of mistaken identity, and marries Olivia. Viola then reveals that she is a girl and marries Orsino. Major themes. Love triangle, or more like love hexagon, if you want to say. It's just all over the place. Gender, homoeroticism, and social class. Here are some key passages to go with the themes. This is for love triangle. This is when Viola first recognizes that Olivia has fallen for her when she was disguised as a boy. Cesario, is that how you pronounce her boy name?
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. The next one is for gender. This is at the end of the play when Orsino knows that Viola is a girl, but he still refers to her as man or boy or Cesario. The next, homoeroticism. This is when Antonio goes after Sebastian, and he's basically declaring his love and his devotion for Sebastian. But sadly, Sebastian does not feel the same way. And lastly, we have social class. This is when Malvolio he's just basically daydreaming about marrying Olivia. It seems like he's in love with her, but honestly, is he really in love with her, or does he just want a higher social class? Discussion topics. Do you think Viola and Orsino lived happily ever after? What about Sebastian and Olivia?
Right. So I'm gonna take over for you a little bit here, Shay, just to give you guys some extra stuff before we get into your questions. You have some good questions, by the way. Um, so one thing that I want to mention real quick is we're dealing with a whole new genre of plays. This is a Shakespearean comedy. Shay mentioned that As You Like It is another great example of one. The Midsummer Night's Dream is another famous example. The Merchant of Venice. So The Taming of the Shrew. There's a whole lot of these plays. The Twelfth Night is arguably the most famous of them. That's why it's in this book instead of any of the others. So I wanted to stop Shay real quick because she asked about how do you think these characters functioned at the end? Do they live happily ever after? That's a good question. When we talked about Lysistrata, if you remember, we talked about how does Lysistrata really have a happy ending, or is it something a little in the fact that it went back to the status quo at the end? Right? Remember that in Lysistrata, they just kind of go completely back to that status quo. It's the same kind of thing with this. In Shakespearean comedies, they always end with marriages. There's always people getting together at the end of Shakespearean plays, and they're presumably going to get married and have a happy life happily ever after. So at the end of this play, this is a good. Almost we need to kind of get back to this question, because at the end of this play we have all these characters getting together after a lot of the tensions that went on in the play. So as Shayla says, Viola and Orsino are one of the couples. Will they live happily ever after? During the whole play, Sebastian and you said so. Sebastian and Olivia. During the whole play, Olivia has the hots for Viola, who is Sebastian's twin sister. Right? So Viola is kind of playing the part of a man. So at the end of the play, conveniently, right, an actual man appears for her to marry. So these two barely know each other. So what's going to happen there? We also have Sir Toby and Maria. Sir Toby and Maria. Sir Toby's was Olivia's uncle. Right, so he's an aristocrat and he marries the maid around the house. So what's gained from that? The characters who don't get married at the end are Malvolio and Antonio, right? So these are the two characters in the play that are kind of the outsiders in a way. So getting back to this question about let's get back to that question about happily ever after. because I feel like we need to discuss the characters first. Let's just kind of go round table here before we get too heavy into the specifics. I'm going to go back to. You can stop your share for now, Shayla, if you want. We'll get back to your questions.
Alrighty.
Yeah, you have some good ones there for us. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot I need to say. But first off, I just want to get your guys' reading experience. Like, how much I'm even curious to know how much have you guys encountered Shakespeare in the past? How was this read for you? Normally, you read a tragedy before a comedy. I mixed it up in this class and had you read comedies first, mostly because my reason was mostly because of Halloween. I figured Macbeth and Hamlet would be good around Halloween, so that was really my only reasoning. Normally I cover a tragedy first. But how did the read go for you guys? Did you find it interesting? Did you find it clever? Did you slog through it? How even like maybe even describe your previous background with Shakespeare in high school and stuff. So who wants to go ahead?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You go ahead.
I've never read Shakespeare. I've heard about him, but I've never read any of his pieces. But I won't lie, this one was kind of sluggish to read. I don't know. I just didn't usually the plays that we read and stuff, they the first page I usually caught on. But this one just kind of went through one ear and out the other, and I just had to keep rereading the same stuff over and over again because I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I think it was because I was just kind of bored with it, but it definitely wasn't the hardest one that we've had to read. Definitely wasn't the hardest.
Yeah, I think Agamemnon still holds that title, right?
Oh yeah, that was. I never want to do that ever again.
It's interesting that you Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare wrote about the same time. It's interesting that you might prefer Christopher Marlowe's style over Shakespeare's, Kira. You did do your presentation on Marlowe after all.
Yeah, I like his style a lot better. Cause I think it's just because the whole play in itself was just really interesting to me. Cause I'm really into learning about that kind of stuff. Cause it's not anything I've ever really thought into. Cause it's not my religion or anything.
Right. Well, what about the rest of you guys? I can kind of go round table here. Faith, what was your experience with this one like? And even how much have you encountered of the Bard before?
I've never read Shakespeare, and it's difficult for me to read Shakespeare, so this was hard. However, I liked it better when people explained it to me instead of me reading it. And then I got an appreciation for the homosexuality in this. That's all.
Period.
So what do you mean by people?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by people explaining it, Faith? Did you look up some videos on YouTube or something?
Yeah, I looked up videos on YouTube of people explaining the summary of it.
Yeah, that's a wise strategy. As you guys work through Shakespeare, we're going to read 2 more. As you guys read through them, definitely listen to summaries. Definitely check Spark Notes. It doesn't hurt to check yourself on Spark Notes for sure. It's not a substitute for reading it, but it's a nice way to check your comprehension. So interesting that for both of you guys, it was your first experience.
I agree. Like, I just wanted to say, I really agree with what Faith said because, like, back then, there wasn't really like, in like the plays that we've read, I've not read anything about homosexuality. And I'm kind of, it kind of just makes like me personally being a part of the community, it makes me like kind of feel like, oh, wow, someone wrote about it. Because I've definitely not seen anything like that, like in like these old types of plays.
Yeah, this is definitely a major theme of the whole thing. Um, at this time period, talking about homosexuality, in this time period, there wasn't really an identity for it yet, per se. Like no one in 1600 like would say I'm gay or I'm a lesbian or bisexual or whatever. At this time period, they saw it. People saw it more or less as something you did. Like even like Christians, of course, saw it as a sin. Um, but yeah, this they called it at this time period the sin of Sodom. That's how it was referred to, the sin of Sodom. Of course, if you guys know your Genesis, right, in the book of Genesis, God pretty much burns down Sodom and Gomorrah because of their immorality. And it's heavily implied that the immorality is because of homosexuality. So that's why they call it that.
It's kind of, it reminds me of like what you're saying about it was seen as like this big sin. Sadly, it's still like that today, but it obviously seemed a lot worse back then than it is now. But I definitely like how you said that they saw it as like this big sin and all that. Like that's a lot like today's age. Like the not saying all Christians are like this, but a lot that I've encountered are like that's a terrible sin. And so it's definitely like interesting to read about that and seeing how like yeah, times have changed a lot, but people's belief systems haven't really changed as much. Like for Christianity, like there's a lot of people that still believe that way, even all these years later, they still think that way. And it's really sad, but like that's just how life is.
Yeah, there's certain Christian sects that are more accepting than others. Like if you go to the Episcopal Church, for instance, they welcome the LGBT community at the Episcopal Church. So yeah, if you're ever interested in exploring the faith here, that might be a place where you would feel more welcomed than maybe more more fire and brimstone types, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my family very much like my older grandparents, which is kind of understandable. They're stuck in their ways, but but I do have some family members that are Christian that don't believe that, being gay or anything like that is an automatic, like you're going to hell, which is kind of how I believe personally, because they're like, I don't think that a gay person's gonna go to hell with Ted Bundy. Like, that's just kind of how I perceive it. And a lot, like my family, some of them think that way too. And sometimes it's like how it was back then and how it is now. There is a change, but it's kind of like they're going against their own religion because they're judging others, which when I was like reading that, I really did kind of think about that. I was like, they're going against their own religion by judging others. So that's what I was thinking when I was reading. I was like, oh, well, they don't make no sense.
Yeah, the I should mention that Shay talked about the Elizabethan era versus the Jacobean era. King James the First of England was actually a known, they called them sodomites, right? King James I was infamous for preferring the company of men over women. So I always like to remind, of course, you guys know I'm Catholic, right? But I always like to remind evangelicals of that the version of the Bible that they claim is the most authoritative was commissioned by a gay guy. So always like to bring that up.
I do that all the time.
Did you know did you know that he was gay, Kira? King James?
Yeah, because every time, like, I've been in a bunch of, like, too many altercations about this topic, and every time I'm like, hey, the Bible has been like, and I'm not saying this to like down on anybody's religion or anything. You believe in what you want to believe in, but the Bible has been translated so many times, and it was written by a gay guy. So like, why are we like? And I bring that up a lot, and it's fun to kind of see the reactions that people have, because some people are like very like, oh, okay, like, and they open their minds more, but a lot of other people are so closed off. But I think that if they heard it from a Christian, they're like, the way they react would be different than hearing it from me, because it's mainly like older people, and I try to be respectful, but like I've had times where like old people will say not nice things to me, and I'm like, well, he's gay, so that's literally just every time I'm like, well, he was gay, and that's just my argument, and they just either start saying I'm going to hell or they just walk away.
He was the person who funded the translation. He didn't necessarily sit down and write it himself. He was the person who gave the money to do it.
Yeah, it's just easier to say it like that, because then they're like,
Right.
because they know, they know, and they're just like, well, and then turn around. I'm like, see, because y'all don't make no sense.
Yeah, these themes. So I gave you guys a little context. Only in the 1800s did sexual identity start. So that's when people started identifying as straight or gay or lesbian or whatever other identity. So the 1800s is when this started. It's a fairly new thing in world history to strictly identify that way. Before that, they didn't see it as a personality, as a part of your identity, right? They just saw it as more or less something you did. So that's, if you guys, of course, we found out in this class, right? If you go back to the ancient Greeks had much different mores than we do today. Like, ancient Greece was very accepting. We encountered some of that in this class, not as much as in my Lily's in the other class. We got a lot more of that with the Iliad and stuff. But this play, so gender and sexuality work in interesting ways in this play. So something I mentioned last week, this is something that you kind of got to see to appreciate. But during Shakespeare's era, women were not allowed to perform on stage, just like in ancient Greece. Right? Women were not allowed to perform on stage. So you had a male actor playing these female parts. Well, already it's kind of bizarre, right? Because you have bizarre in the sense that they're supposed to be like a man and a woman, but maybe you have like a man and a younger boy with a squeaky voice on stage, right? So it's already a little bizarre because of those rules. But Shakespeare played with it, like the fact that he has all this cross-dressing in the play. So you have Viola, right, who pretends to be Cesario. So there's a lot of gender swapping. So you have a man actor playing a female part who then becomes a male in the play. So you kind of have this like triple layer of gendering going on. Shakespeare is known as like one of the first writers to kind of show that gender is more than just your body parts and your anatomy. Right? Gender is kind of a identity that you come up with more than even your anatomy. So Shakespeare has aged really well with what current gender theory and stuff because of this sort of triple layer of gender swapping here. This causes all kinds of chaos in the play. Viola falls in love with, or Olivia falls in love with Viola because she thinks she's a man. So there's some social tensions brewing in the play, right? Then you have Antonio and Sebastian's relationship. These two are really close. And at the end of the play, it's kind of plucked away from Antonio because Sebastian conveniently meets Olivia and marries her. So Sebastian's kind of left out in the cold at the end of the play. So I guess the point I'm raising here is the way the play's structured, right, with these marriages at the end, says a lot about how it kind of handles those the tensions of gender in the play. The gay guy at the end of the play, right, he's left out in the cold. Olivia conveniently meets the male twin of Viola. Right, it's so convenient how it happens, right? So all this stuff was meant to raise laughs, right? It's meant to be funny. The way that they get confused and the character, like you laugh whenever you see the play. But as far as like the politics of the play goes, arguably the play is pretty conservative, right? Because so many characters are kind of left out at the end. Especially Sebastian. Malvolio is too, but he's another topic in a moment. So what do some of you guys think about that? I'm just kind of musing aloud here, but did you feel like the play treated Sebastian kind of dirty, Kira? Like the way he's just kind of left out in the cold at the end?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave my answers.
Yeah, well, just think about it. Like the character has to, in Shakespearean plays, the characters have to get married, and that would have definitely been a taboo idea for the time, right? To have a same-sex marriage. So structurally, within the structure of comedy, you can kind of raise the issue, but you can't really take it to the next level, if that makes sense. Yeah, this all definitely adds to the whole puzzle of the play. All this gender swapping and the laughs that ensue from that. Let's kind of swing back around to more of a general overview of what some of the rest of you guys might have found interesting about it. Josh, you said this is your first experience reading Shakespeare yourself?
Yeah, this is the first time I've really read Shakespeare.
What did you think of the play?
I like the play. I I've seen it before in like a movie, so I knew what the basic plot was already. So it kind of helped me out with some of the more archaic terminology that was in there. So I think seeing it in a live action format is very beneficial to doing this type of topic.
Did you listen to it? Did you listen to this one too? I know you've talked before about
I did do this one on audiobook.
Did you have a pretty good reading of it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Good. It's kind of surprising to me that it's all your guys' first experience with Shakespeare. Usually, at least in high school, they'll usually do Romeo at the very least. Yeah, you did not do. I saw Faith shaking your head there. You didn't do Romeo. And usually that one's done in 9th grade. I know when I went to Wyoming East a long time ago, we did it in the 9th grade. Daryl, what about you? Have you encountered Shakespeare before?
I actually did exactly what you just said. I believe it was my 9th grade year, but I did read Romeo and Juliet, and we watched like a movie adaptation sort of thing of it. And then I think 10th grade I didn't get to read any, but in 11th grade, this is the year all the COVID stuff began. Our teacher was planning to get into Shakespeare near the end of the year, like before finals as our last few assignments. I think he had Hamlet and Macbeth both planned, and I'm not sure if those are both Shakespeare. I know that. Okay, I thought that they were, but I wasn't positive. And then, of course, in March we all got out early, so I didn't exactly get around to reading those two. But I think other than that, that's the only experience I've had is Romeo and Juliet. And of course, like everyone else in the class, I've heard of him a ton. I know that he's written many plays, and I guess this is my second one.
Yeah, Romeo's often taught wrong in high school, I think. Like the play, Shakespeare meant it to be like this really cliche love story. Like he kind of wrote it off like it's a joke, but everybody takes it super seriously. So yeah, he didn't mean it to be a serious play, but people read it that way, which is kind of funny. Yeah, it's good to know that Wyoming East still has him in the curriculum. Yeah, of course, Hamlet and Macbeth we're going to do in the next few weeks. Let's see, Shay, what about you? You did the presentation. Was this your first go with Shakespeare?
No, I was just waiting to jump in the conversation. I hate talking over people, so I always get really scared just to talk. But I went to East and we did do Romeo and Juliet my 9th grade year. And then last year, we read As You Like It.
So you've already,
and that's why I put it in the, yeah.
You've already encountered Shakespearean comedy before then. You remember a lot about As You Like It? Like how did it compare and contrast with 12th Night for you?
No. All I read, we just read it as a class and we each had parts. I think I read Rosalind. I can't remember. I just remember liking the Fool.
Right. It's been a few years since I've read that one myself. My brain's not too fresh on it. I probably haven't read it in 10 years. So I think one of you guys mentioned a moment ago, 12th Night is a movie adaptation. I think Josh did. The most famous movie adaptation about this is the 1999 comedy 12 Things I Hate About You. that's this play modernized for a modern audience. Have any of you guys ever seen that film, 12 Things I Hate About You? It's a really good movie from the 90s, 1999. So it's a classic of cinema. So I would encourage you guys to look it up if you kind of want to see how they modernized this story for 20 years ago. It's not really contemporary, right? It makes me feel old, but for a fairly recent audience.
I think the movie She's the Man is also based off this play.
I don't think I've seen that one.
I love that movie. It's so funny.
Let's see, I'm Googling it. 2006. Channing Tatum's in it.
That movie cracks me up. It's so good though. And I agree with her. I was thinking of that movie when I was reading this.
I'm gonna have to check that out. You guys know I'm the resident movie guru at Southern, so there's lots of stuff I need that's on my to watch list. Lily, what about yourself? How have you encountered Shakespeare before now? How did it go for you?
I have. It's been 25 years ago, but I read Macbeth in high school and Romeo and Juliet. And I think they're kind of difficult to read, the language. But now this one was kind of confusing to me with so many characters and switching back and forth. So,
Right. Yeah.
but now he kind of took it slow in high school and he went slow through it. And we kind of like dissected the play, you know what I mean? And
yeah, read it line by line.
yeah. Give us a better understanding of it.
Yeah, unfortunately in college we don't have as many hours as high school to do that kind of thing. I would love to teach one of these word by word, line by line like that. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's the thing about college. You just don't have enough time. It's like that religion class I took. I really liked it. You go back through so much information in such less time.
Yeah, covering all the world religions in 16 weeks. That's no small undertaking. Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Shintoism, not to mention Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right? Our session last night on Islam was a good session, Lily, on for English 230. I hope you get to watch it. It was a good session, especially if you're taking the religion class.
I took that last semester, so
Did you?
yeah. I really enjoyed it too. I really enjoy your classes too.
Well, I appreciate that. Ben, I know you usually type on the chat rather than speak. Feel free to chime in with your experiences with Shakespeare and what you thought of this one. So you guys pointed out that the language of Shakespeare is sometimes a little difficult. Yeah, Shakespeare has invented thousands of words in our language. It's in the thousands of the words that he invented. So that is definitely one of his contributions. He has this status as being a high culture, right? Like if you think about like what high culture is, like maybe you might think of something like the opera, right? You go to the opera, that's something like very educated people do, right? Shakespeare's kind of has that reputation as well. I had a professor once in grad school who told me that his students would come back to him later in life because this guy taught nothing but Shakespeare. That's all he taught. But he said that his students would come back to him later in life and talk about, hey, like out in the business world, like we went to this like Shakespeare play just for like a business trip. So like it's amazing how much like if you're a certain status in the world, right, some knowledge of Shakespeare is expected. Like he talked about that. So yeah, I always found that interesting. But Shakespeare was writing in a time where the English language changed. So if you guys read Everyman a couple of weeks ago, we didn't really get a dive deep into it because that was the week I was discussing Christianity. But if you read Everyman, if you read it in the original, it reads a lot different. The original is written in what's called Middle English, and Shakespeare, today you might call him Middle English, but he really wasn't. He was this time period where Marlowe and Shakespeare was writing. This was the birth of our modern English language. So that's something I wanted to point out to you all. But instead of pontificating about Shakespeare himself, I'm going to get back into the play. So I think we did an interesting job discussing Viola and Sebastian, like we talked about the homoerotic themes. Something else this play is about is social class, as Michaela said. Michaela, pull your slide back up if you don't mind, since we got to kind of have a general conversation.
Give me a second.
You got it. So my favorite character in this whole play is Malvolio. He's my favorite. Yeah, she has that nice quote there. There's example for it. The lady of the Strachey married the yeoman of the wardrobe. Malvolio is my favorite of the play. One thing to say about the English, and I'm not generalizing when I say this. Go up to your questions, Shayla, if you don't mind. One thing to say about the English is they've always been very concerned about social class. That's a little bit of a hard thing for us to wrap our minds around as Americans. But the British have always been concerned about social class, right? Just watch Titanic, right? The movie Titanic, and you can kind of see that play out, right? The Brits have always been worried about class and status. How far back does your family go? Medieval Europe, you had, of course, they would pass down property to the oldest sons, and that's how we would pass down the family line. But medieval Europe, this was definitely patriarchal in that regard. But at this time period in history, in the Middle Ages, you didn't really have much of an economy. You had there's a famous saying about the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, there was only 3 jobs. Right? You could either be a poor farmer, you could be a priest in the clergy, and you could be an aristocrat who owned a bunch of wealth and land. And up above the aristocracy is the royalty, clergy, the peasants. that was the whole extent of the medieval economy. 98% of the people were peasants who worked 12-hour, not even more than 12, about 15-hour days, six days a week. So that's a little bit of a hard thought. But at this time period, the early 1600s, this is when different jobs started springing up. This is the time period where you really start to see a growing middle class in Europe. And Malvolio in the play kind of represents that growing middle class. He is a yeoman. A yeoman was the person who took care of the aristocrat's estate. So he was the person who kept the books. He managed the workers. Malvolio is the one who's doing all the work while Olivia sits on her butt, right? So here's a guy who's in this firm middle class. One thing to say, it's going to feel like I'm changing subjects here, but I'm really not. One thing to say about the play is called Twelfth Night. That refers, this is a Christmas play. Okay, this is the Christmas play. The term 12th night refers to the 12 days of Christmas. And of course, in Catholicism, Christmas actually goes up until 12 days after Christmas. Christmas Day is actually the start of what you call 12 days of Christmas. And on 12th night, the last day, this was a day in England that they had as a holiday where they would just completely flip the switch on how society was structured. So on 12th night, the king in this like festival would act like a peasant, and like the lowliest of peasants would act like aristocrats. Like they would just kind of flip the switch on where they stood. It was kind of a way of letting out your frustrations, I guess you could say, right? You could eat, drink, dress like an aristocrat. The English actually even had laws dictating what kind of collar clothes you could wear. I'm wearing purple today. It's kind of funny, I'm wearing purple. I didn't do that on purpose. But I'm wearing purple today. If you were the only people allowed to wear purple in Renaissance England was the royalty. Like you couldn't be somebody like Malvolio and wear purple, right? Because only the royalty were allowed to wear purple. Can any of you guys guess why that purple was only allowed for the royalty? Can any of you guys guess? Maybe guess why? I'm curious if one of you guys can guess.
I figured it was because dyed clothing was just hard to get.
Exactly. You nailed it, Shayla. Exactly. Yeah, it's hard. It was hard to get. You had to import it from Asia, probably China somewhere, and that wasn't an easy thing to do in the 1600s. There wasn't a lot of roads and communication networks. Yeah, even if you could afford it, you weren't allowed to wear purple in public because purple was the color of the royalty. So this is the very holiday 12th night is all about flipping the switch. One day a year, these people were allowed to kind of get out and vent and let it all out and act rich, even if they weren't. So it's interesting that we have Malvolio in the play. Here's a guy who wants to kind of rise in the ladder. Shayla said it well earlier that he presumably is in love with Olivia. Is he really in love with Olivia? or does he want her? Does he want her purse? Does he want her status? That's a difficult question. I don't know. But Shayla's second question here: do you think Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, and Maria went too far with their trick on Malvolio? So what do? They write Olivia a letter like that's kind of vague, right? Saying, hey, meet me at this time, signed M. So Malvolio thinks that Olivia is writing him a love letter. So he gets excited and he goes and puts on his yellow stockings. He would, so let me see if I can pull a picture up for you guys. Just to show you how repulsive these stockings were. This is a pretty good picture. Here, this is what his stockings will look like. They go pretty much all the way up to his thighs. Yellow was seen as the collar. Yellow had an association with the peasantry. Yellow is not a collar that nobility would wear. So when Malvolio goes and wears these yellow stockings while he's trying to seduce Olivia, right? He's making a giant ass out of himself. Right? So part of it's always fun. This is always one of the funniest parts of the play to watch whenever it's staged, because he just kind of completely makes this giant fool of himself. It's this type of comedy that it's the cringe comedy. Right? You laugh at how cringy it is. That's its own genre of comedy almost. Right? But you kind of laugh at how cringy Malvolio is. And he's cringy because he's going up in front of high, almost royalty, wearing this base collar of the riffraff. Malvolio doesn't really show an understanding of social decorum in England, I guess you could say. But something else to say about Malvolio, get back to this question, something else to say about him is he's also a Puritan. They make mention of his being a Puritan. Which you guys probably, I hope you guys remember from 2 weeks ago when we talked about Christianity. The Puritans were the Calvinists. The Calvinists were the people who believed in predestination, like God predestined your salvation. And the Puritans wanted to purify the Anglican Church, and they wanted to remove it of all of its Catholic influences. So Puritans were often seen as almost like the party poopers, right? They wanted to get rid of music in church. They wanted to get rid of images in church, whether it was statues or icons. They wanted to go back to like the most basic level of worship. And it was the Puritans who hated the theater. I told you guys before, at this time period, Shakespeare's theater, it was in the bad part of London where they had prostitution, where they had bear baiting, gambling. Puritans, of course, didn't like that. They saw that as the root of all evil. So the very fact that he's a character in this play, that doesn't like, Puritans didn't like drama. Puritans tried to ban theater in England. They actually did in the 1660s during the Civil War period when they took over. Only in the late 1660s, when the monarchy was restored again, did the theater come back. They actually succeeded in banning it for a long time. when it came back, women were allowed on stage for the first time, by the way. 1660s, that was one of the first times in world history where women actors were allowed on stage. But Malvolio not only wants to rise in class, he's also like this hardcore Christian type character who doesn't know how to have fun. So that's another element to add to his character here, right? Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, they just want to get drunk and have fun. Malvolio's the guy who comes in and ruins the party, right? Go to bed, I'm trying to sleep, right? Maybe I don't know, maybe he's my favorite character because I relate to him. I don't know. I'm an old man who can't put up with the shenanigans anymore. But I wanted to tell you guys about all that social class, about the stalkings and all that, to kind of ground us with Michaela's question. Do you think Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, and Maria went too far with their trick on Malvolio? Like, should we laugh at Malvolio's expense? The cringe humor, as I said, right? How did you guys feel about him? Did you feel sorry for him? Did you feel like he got what he deserved? What did you think?
He was a bit of a turd.
Right?
But going back to the quote that I put, I don't actually think he was in love with Olivia, because like the entire time that he's like talking to himself, daydreaming about it, he's not daydreaming about Olivia in any way. He's daydreaming about not having to be a servant anymore and having people do things for him. So I mean, maybe he did kind of deserve it.
Right. He doesn't know his place, right? He should not all. I don't know if you meant it that way, Michelle. Like, I think you meant it more in the way of like, he didn't love her. He loved the idea of being with her because of what she could give him.
Yeah.
Well, how do the rest of you guys feel? Did the rest of you guys feel like he was a turd, as Michelle said? Or
I agree with her.
how so, Kira?
Like how she brought up the fact that when he was like thinking about it, he wasn't thinking about like being with her. He was thinking about the benefits of her. I don't think that he wanted to be with her or loved her. He just like wanted the advantages of her, like what she would give him and what he would receive from being with her.
Right. If you think about what marriage was like at this time, that was often why men would get married, right? They would want to gain some type of financial advantage from it. People at this time rarely got married for love. Usually, I don't know if I've talked about the marriage economy in this class before. I don't think so. But the marriage economy, the way that it worked in Europe, I talked about this with the Greeks, I think, right? Like, men would marry just for money. And you guys tell me if I'm hallucinating. I have talked about this before, right?
Yeah, you have.
Yeah. Men would marry for money and advancement. So if we were going to make it, maybe in this world, right, where it's all about love, maybe Malvolio is kind of a villain for wanting to marry for money. But pragmatically, that's what everybody tried to do, right? You wanted to marry to gain some type of dowry from it. You guys ever read like the Jane Austen novel, like Pride and Prejudice or something, right? Jane Austen made a whole career of writing romance plots about forced arranged marriages and stuff like that. So two of you here, not really feeling much pity for Malvolio. They take it way far, right? Not only do they humiliate him, they also do a faux exorcism on Malvolio. They make him think he's losing his mind, right? They lock him up below the trap door on the stage. I told you guys before on the stage you had a trap door. They locked him down there and made him think like he was in hell or something. Made him think he had lost his sanity. So that they really take this joke pretty far, right? They really take it pretty far. At the end of the play, Malvolio comes out. So here's everybody coming out with their happy ending. Malvolio kind of comes out at the end and leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, right? His final line of the play is, "I'll be revenged on the whole lot of you." That's his play. So that's his final line. So you can kind of imagine like what's going to happen after this play. Like, how is he going to get revenge? Maybe who knows, right? But maybe there's 12th Night fan fiction here, right? Maybe he goes and murders them all, right? Maybe he does nothing and just goes home and sulks, right? But he kind of leaves a sour taste in the mouth at the end. But Josh, you said you agree. You think that they take the practical jokes too far?
I do think they went a little too far with the whole turning him mad and then locking him in a dungeon thing. That's the point where the joke went a little too far.
The joke was no longer a joke. Like, that reminds me a lot of like somebody that cuts your hair and they're like, "Oh, it's just a joke." It's not funny.
It's like if I make somebody look stupid in front of a bunch of people and then I call the cops on them for being stupid. That just takes the joke a little too far.
Right. Yeah, you can kind of feel the cruelty in the joke. Right. It's yeah, it stops becoming humorous and becomes something kind of cruel. So again, maybe it's this play. I like to say that 12 Night is one of the most conservative texts I've ever seen. Right? It makes you think it's not, because it shows things like homosexuality, right? It shows things like social advancement. But what's it do to all these characters who try to go too far with it? It crushes them. Right? It crushes them. Dr. Faustus last week was a similar play, right? Faustus tries to take the limits of knowledge too far. Well, once he find out, there's only so far you can go, right? He's crushed.
He was just an idiot.
Right.
At like the nicest way to put it. But like those jokes, like, yeah, jokes are funny and whatnot, but when you're starting to mess with someone's like mental health, like quite literally turning them insane, that's not funny. If I like got back in my right mind and realized what they done to me, ooh, it would not be pretty. I would get my revenge.
Right. Yeah, it definitely. I agree 100% with everything you said here. I mean, I would want revenge too after somebody did all that stuff to me, all just because I wanted to better myself in life, right? It's all these rich people poking fun at the poor guy, right? That's kind of the mean spirited humor that comes from it.
See, like, I could understand maybe like messing with him a little bit if they like knew he was just using her to get what he wanted. Like, I get that, like messing with him just a bit, but they took it way too far. Like the socks, like there's a certain point to where okay, they got what they deserved. No one deserves. Well, I mean, some people deserve, like they don't deserve to go like clinically insane because of a joke. Like I definitely don't think that was a joke. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, the joke becomes bullying, right? Like it's hard to argue that this isn't some like mean girl high school bullying type stuff that's going on here.
Yeah, the letter was enough. But I think they were just mad because he wouldn't let them party and have a good time.
Right. He's an old man. He just wants to go to bed at 8:30, right? And, right.
I mean, like Faith goes to bed at 8:30, but you don't see me driving her clinically insane.
Not true. I go to bed at 9 now. That was high school. I went to bed at 8.
Sorry, my bad.
You're an early to bed person over there, Faith.
I go to sleep early. I wake up early.
Yeah, I'm the exact opposite. I'm the type of person that if left to my own devices, I'll stay up till like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then sleep till 12 or 1 in the day. I used to do that whenever I taught for Southern and just worked online classes as I did. Like I had the most dysfunctional schedule. Now I'm on more of a structured schedule. I don't know if I like it. I would go back to the dysfunction if I could. Daryl, what do you think about all this stuff with Malvolio? Do you agree with everybody who's commented? Do you think he got what he deserved?
I do mostly agree with everyone. That I think that the others went a little bit too far with it. Maybe at the start you could see it as like, okay, he's this grumpy old man, and they just didn't really think that his intentions with Olivia were the best, so they just wanted to make him look like a fool in public and be done with it. But then they just sort of kept going, and that's sort of when it's like, okay, he's sort of just a guy. He didn't exactly do anything worth all of this.
They act like he killed somebody. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm not a sensitive person, but that was a little no. Like all that was just no. You don't mess with someone's mental health. Like the note, haha, funny, but not doing all that. They were doing way too much.
Yeah, something I should mention is we're definitely kind of putting a 21st century spin on this character. Like if you would have read, that's another part of Shakespeare's genius, right? We're kind of putting that's the 21st century spin on them. But if you would have seen this play in like 1730 or something, right? Nobody would have felt sympathy for this guy. Everybody would have laughed. That's just how the English were. We're a little less into social class as Americans. Americans have always tried to get rid of that old school European views on social class. Not to say that it isn't still here. I mean, just get on an airplane. If you ever get on an airplane, right, you can see that social class is still a real thing. Yeah, I'm always the one in the back of the plane next to the bathroom, right? But yeah, you see it's still a real thing, but it's still compared to the Europeans, even today, nowhere near as much. So Americans kind of have their own unique spin on this play. some people are more sensitive to this theme than others. I think Americans, just by our very nature, pick this apart a little more than maybe English readers would.
I definitely feel like that's the case for me. Like, I'm really sensitive to like, because like you said, this is bullying. And I'm very sensitive to that type of things because I've experienced it and I've had my mental health. Like, I've had people do bad things to my mental health for like their enjoyment. So like I can definitely like feel bad for him, and like it sucks that people do those types of things. But I think that's definitely why I feel so like bad about it, and like I really like thought into it and stuff because I've been through certain like experiences like that. So I definitely feel like if you've been through that type of thing, then you're going to feel like more sympathy towards it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear, Kira, that you've had to put up with stuff like that.
No, it's okay. I don't care
Yeah,
anymore. Those
right.
people are irrelevant.
Right. Yeah. You can't heed ignorant people, right? You can't pay attention to them. But yeah, like in our current culture, right? It is a little easier to sympathize with Malvolio. Whenever I see an adaptation of the play, I always laugh at the stockings part, just because it's hard not to. Like he's acting so in love and infatuated, always making a big fool of himself. But the exorcism and all that I think that's always when it takes it a little too far over the edge. Question 4, I like your question 4 here, Shayla. Did you learn anything valuable from the play? Do you think it was just another romantic comedy? So we spent the last hour and 20 minutes analyzing the play. Do you guys find deep meanings in this, like we've been trying to say or to argue, or do you see this as just another romantic comedy? I think that's a good question.
Not gonna lie, I did not get anything valuable from it. I
Really?
enjoyed it a lot, but nothing that like made me think really hard or like, oh wow, my views about this changed.
Has discussing it changed anything, Michelle? Like, oh, this is more complicated than I thought it was.
Well, I'm not too sure.
Right? You might have to mull over it. Yeah, I think
Definitely gave me a different like point of view, like really on, because like I knew people were cruel, like I got that, but this really showed you that people are like really cruel, and that you don't need to like feed into it, or like be cautious is like the main thing. Like be cautious and don't like take everything to the gospel and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna listen to what they say.
Yeah, that would have been a good lesson for Malvolio to have learned, right? Be cautious. What about the rest of you? Did you learn anything valuable from the play, or was it just like any other romantic comedy? You think about romantic comedies today, right? They're almost a cookie cutter genre, right? Just Lifetime movies, right? Like there's a formula to them, right? That I guess that's kind of what you're maybe saying here, Michelle, right? Like, is this the typical formula? Um, maybe Shakespeare invented the formula, right? If you want to think about it that way. It's never been my favorite genre of film. There's a few good ones, like 12 Things I Hate About You, like I mentioned. I like that one. One thing I want to do real quick is actually point you guys to some famous passages in the play. I always have to point out some of the famous lines. Anytime you cover Shakespeare, if you don't cover at least a couple of scenes, you're probably doing them a disservice. Probably the most famous speech in the whole play is the very beginning, Act 1, Scene 1, Line 1. You guys want to look in your books, it's on page 813, the very first page of the play. Go back to the main screen here. Something to say about Shakespeare is he writes his plays in also his poetry in what's called iambic pentameter. What that is, it's a rhythm. Like iambic pentameter is a rhythm. So if you read these lines, if you count the syllables in each line, each one of these lines has 10 syllables, maybe 11. Most of the time he counts up right at 10. But the way that it works, anytime you say something, you enunciate certain syllables more in a word. So if it's like, let's say for instance that it's a one syllable noun, like love, right? Love is a one syllable noun. Love would be a stressed syllable, right? Anytime you read something, your tongue just kind of naturally emphasizes those one syllable nouns. If you think about certain words have multiple symbols or syllables. Music, that muse-ic, right? 2 syllables. Which syllable do I enunciate more? Muse more than ic, right? And what Shakespeare does, he writes in this iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter because it has a da-dum, da-dum, da-dum beat. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And you can kind of hear it if we read this passage. This passage is known as, this passage is famous for describing the feeling of infatuation. So anytime you guys meet somebody, maybe you have that crush on them, right? It's that overwhelming feeling that you kind of get in your stomach. That's kind of what this first passage in the play is kind of trying to emphasize. They call it limerence, right? Love and limerence. Limerence is that first feeling of infatuation a couple has for each other, right? The early days of dating, right? When a couple can't get enough of each other, limerence. That's kind of what Orsino is describing here. But this is a very famous line. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. That strain again, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came over my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough, no more. 'Tis not so sweet now as it was before. O spirit of love, how quick and fresh art thou. that notwithstanding thy capacity receiveth as the sea, not enters there of what validity and pitch soever, but falls into abatement and low price even in a minute. So full of shapes is fancy that it alone is high fantastical. So if you break down the imagery here, right, he's comparing, he says, if music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it. So he's the image here, he's comparing it to overeating. He says, give me excess of it, that once I eat so much, my appetite may sicken and so die. Right? He's almost kind of saying love is like that, right? It's like when you overeat and you get sick to your stomach, right? That's kind of the image he's having here. I'll eventually hurl. That's what that feeling of limerence feels like, excess, right? You can't get enough of the person. But that line, if music can be the food of love, play on. That's one of the most famous lines in English literature. I would have been remiss if I wouldn't have mentioned it. That's what Orsino's character is all about. We haven't really talked about Orsino, but he has this, like, he marries Olivia at the end, right? Orsino doesn't. He wants to marry Olivia, but he marries Viola. Viola's in love with him when she's playing Cesario. So a question of whether these marriages are going to last, right? That's one that I always kind of raise a skeptical eye to, right? Like, he's kind of like, oh, cool, right? You're a girl, awesome. Right? That's kind of how his character ends. But yeah, I would have been heavily remiss if I wouldn't have mentioned that passage. I was talking about iambic pentameter. You can kind of hear it. If music be the food of love, play on. Right? You can kind of hear that boom, boom. That's one thing to mention about Shakespeare. He always writes this way. Iambic pentameter is what it's called. In a couple of weeks, Lily, you will practice writing an iambic pentameter because you'll write a sonnet in the other class. So it's a concept you definitely need to wrap your mind around now, because it'll come up again.
Thank you.
Right?
I'll need that.
It's some people
Seems
have it,
like I've heard this before, maybe in high school.
maybe in high school.
Yeah. It's Shakespeare.
Yes. Some people have an ear for rhythm, and some don't. One of the bad things about me when I teach Shakespeare, I don't think I have a good ear for rhythm. So when I try to explain this, boom, boom, I sometimes don't know if I'm coming through because I don't have the best ear for music and rhythm myself.
I'll be on the lookout for it.
All right.
The upcoming days.
Yeah, we're a couple weeks. That'll be what we read here in a couple weeks. So let's end our discussion today with this question. Okay. I want you guys to kind of identify whether you think these marriages are going to work. So that was Shay's first question, right? Are these marriages going to work? So let's take Orsino and Viola, right? Previously to this, she thought that but Orsino just thought that Viola was his servant, right? Like I said, he's kind of like, oh, cool, you're a girl, right? Do you guys see this marriage working out in the future? What do y'all think?
I see it working out better than Sebastian and Olivia. I think they'll work
Right?
out all right. Honestly, I don't
Yeah.
think Orsino cared that Viola was a boy anyway.
Right? He could have swung both ways, right?
Mhm.
Maybe that's why it was so easy for him, Shay. Like he wasn't too hung up on it,
Probably. He was like, oh, win-win either way. Cool.
right? What's the rest of y'all think? You see Orsino and Viola working out? Knowing how Orsino thinks about love, like love's like making yourself sick to your stomach so you'll throw up, right? That's not really what love is, right? Love isn't that feeling you have in that first stages of a relationship, right? Love is something deeper than that. Orsino, if you ask me, I think Orsino has some valuable lessons that he needs to learn.
I feel like in that first paragraph, he's just describing young love.
Young love, right?
He's just like a teenage boy who's like, girls.
That's a good way to describe it, Shay. Some people are like that though. Like we mentioned Romeo and Juliet, right? That's what Romeo and Juliet is. It's this play about this infatuation. And Juliet takes it so far she kills herself at the end of the play when Romeo dies, right? So yeah, this feeling of infatuation some people get. Some people think infatuation is love when it's really not. Why do you think that sometimes think about your own lives, guys. Maybe you've had a crush on someone before, it didn't work out. You felt crushed at first, but then you really quickly got over it. Right? Why did you really quickly get over it? Because you really wasn't in love, right? It was infatuation. It's chemicals going on up in your brain. So say you said you didn't see Olivia and Sebastian working out,
No, not at all. They didn't know each other at all.
huh?
Olivia was just like, oh, look, someone who looks exactly like the guy I had a crush on. Okay, this worked out. If I'm remembering right, I don't remember what line it was, but Olivia suggests that she has like a preference for young feminine boys.
Mm-hmm.
And considering that they're twins, they had to look identical, of course. So she was just probably very happy that it worked out in the end for her. I'm still very sad about Antonio, though. Poor
Antonio,
guy.
hashtag justice for Antonio. Right?
Yeah, really. I got excited. I really got my hopes up. I was like, oh, a little gay love scene. Oh my God. But I knew in the end it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking because, like you see in a couple of scenes, because Antonio comes in and he thinks he sees Sebastian, but it's really Olivia, but it's really Viola. She's like, I don't know who you are, and that's kind of, you can kind of feel Sebastian's, or you can kind of feel his or Antonio's heart breaking too right there. So that's kind of another cruel scene in the play. Yeah, Olivia knew that she wanted to jump Viola's bones, right? So it doesn't matter to her if it's the same person, right? She knows what she likes. Will that work out? Doubtful, right? How do the rest? How did Faith? What do you think about that relationship? Do you see it working out?
It could. He could probably have a different outlook on love the farther in the relationship that he goes. But as of right now, maybe it couldn't. I don't know. I would need to see the relationship more in action to really get a opinion on it.
Right. Maybe it would. Sebastian doesn't seem to be arguing, right? He's like, heck yeah, I got this woman who wants to marry me, this rich lady. Cool. Right? That's kind of his attitude here. Sir Toby and Maria also get married. This wedding's kind of taboo for the play. Sir Toby's a rich aristocrat. He doesn't really do anything. He just gets drunk all day at his niece's house. But he marries the help, Maria. Again, very taboo. Sir Toby had nothing to gain from that wedding. Like she couldn't give him any money. So what do you got? What do some of you all think about that one, Sir Toby and Maria? We haven't really gotten to discuss their characters much either. They're the jokesters of the play, right? I kind of feel like that one. I feel like that one's going to work out, right? No money's being traded, but I feel like that's why it's going to work, right? They really get each other.
Yeah. Since she has nothing to give, he obviously has to like really want to be with her.
Right. Yeah. Josh, you are in agreement on that?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I've always felt like that one's the sweetest of the lot. Of all of them, nothing to gain for Sir Toby. He's going to drink and be merry with her for the rest of his days.
That's probably like the only pure love in the whole play.
Right. Nothing to gain, no motive. Well, there you have it, guys. 12th Night by William Shakespeare. So I feel like we had a pretty lively conversation about it. We didn't cover a lot, though. Like I didn't really talk about the Fool's character, Feste. Feste is a character who's kind of, I mentioned social class. Court jesters were kind of the lowest end of the social class. But court jesters were the only people who would tell the truth. It's a shame we're not going to read King Lear in here because that's where that kind of character really shines. But Feste's kind of he's a clown, right? But what did clowns do back then? They told it like it was. And no, anybody else could be beaten or whipped or put into the stocks for mouthing off. A clown would say it, and he had the right to. So the clown was kind of the lowest end of the totem pole, but in a way he had a lot of power. Feste in the play is Olivia's clown, right? He's there just to entertain her. But he's kind of a malcontent. He's tired of being a clown. So throughout the play, he's kind of making comments like, hey, you can kind of see that he's tired of his profession throughout the play, but nonetheless, he still has to play the part of the clown. So he's a fun little character. He's a fun character in the play too. This is the type of play, it's not, this is the type of play where I hate that we have a once a week class. If we had this class twice a week, I would have had you guys read the first 3 acts first and then the final 2 acts. I feel like that's a better way to break it down because people get tired in these big 2-hour-long classes. Yeah, I feel like with Shakespeare, that's a better way to go about reading them. But well, that puts a wrap on this. Just with some announcements, guys. I need to post another grammar quiz for you soon. I've already done sentence combining, cutting clutter, and active and passive voice. I think the next one I'm going to do will be prepositional phrases. I think that'll be the next one that I get. Maybe some common typos. So I need to sit down and design a quiz for that. Sometime over the next week, I'll do that. I'll give you plenty of time to take it, of course. Just as another announcement, I have your midterm, I have your first short paper. They're next on my list. So by this end of this week, I should have those returned to you. So at that point, you will have that paper grade. I'm going to give everybody a midterm participation grade as well. I think participation is worth so much in the class. Let's see. I'll double check my syllabus. Yeah, participation is only worth 5%, but that's something. So I'll give you guys your first short paper grade, your participation grade. And for the 2 of you who presented already, I will try to get that grade to you as well. By next week, by the time we meet again, you should have, right now you guys don't know your grade really, because we haven't really had that many assignments to do. But next week you should have some assignments rolling in to where you know how you're doing in the class. I also say this, I think everybody's going to do really well in this class. This is a great class. Just for as small of a group as we have, I feel like we have some great discussions. So I have no doubts that all of you guys are going to do real well. So next week you'll at least have something to go on. That way you won't be like, what's my grade? What's my grade? Right? You'll have a few in the grade book by next week. And next week's play is The Duchess of Malfi. I'm really excited about that one. I haven't ever taught that play before. I've taught pretty much every other play in this class. I've never taught that one before. So I'm going to be rereading it. A lot of these plays, I have notes. I don't have to always go back and revisit them before I teach them. This will be one I'll be reading with you guys. I haven't read this one in many years. So I remember it's one of the great Renaissance plays. John Webster is our writer. So we're going to go from John Webster back to Shakespeare again. So the whole rest of the month is Renaissance drama, Renaissance tragedy. But Duchess of Malfi is next. Savannah will be our presenter next week. She couldn't be with us tonight because of family emergency, but she should be our presenter next week. So yeah, that's what the rest of the month looks like. Duchess of Malfi 11th, Hamlet the 18th, led by Daryl, and the 25th is Macbeth, led by Josh. Now after that, we'll get into more modern drama. Okay. And probably the next short paper, that'll probably be due, let's see. I'm going to pull the syllabus up. I figured I'd spend the last few minutes talking about class business. You have 3 short papers in the class. Probably the next one will be due sometime at the end of October, going into November. I figured I would break it up into ancient Greek period medieval and Renaissance period, and then modern period. That's how I'm going to break the short papers up. So it'll be a while yet before we have another one of those due. I will say this, once I grade these papers, if you guys want to revise them, I will allow a revision, because that's just the type of teacher I am. I don't believe in telling you what you're doing wrong. I want to help you get better. So I will allow a revision. Let's say you get a B or C or something, I will allow a revision so you can make it better. But I should have those back to you by the end of the week. You guys are next in my stack. Any questions or comments about class business? Anything before we depart? You guys all feeling good? Give me the thumbs up on the reactions if you guys are feeling good. All right. Awesome. Yeah, again, guys, it's a pleasure. Tuesday nights are always fun. Yeah, you guys are one of my fun classes this term, so I always appreciate you guys. I always appreciate you doing the reading and being ready to talk. So yeah, you guys are awesome. So I will look forward to next week, and I will look forward to revisiting this play that I haven't read in many years with you all. So, take it easy, guys. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
See you, Josh. See you, Lily.
Bye.
Shayla. Good job, Michelle. Good job tonight.
Thank you.